Before I begin, I need to make something clear. The names in my story aren't real. I've changed them because it's easier to share when I don't have to see my own name tied to every mistake. But the regret, that part is very painfully real. This is the story of how I let go of a man who loved me more than anyone else ever could, and how I realized it far too late. My name is Emily. I'm 39 years old, and I was married to Daniel for almost 14 years. Saying was instead of still feels strange, like I'm talking about someone else's life instead of mine. But I guess that's what happens when you slowly drift out of love and don't even notice when it started. When I first met Daniel, he wasn't the loudest or flashiest guy in the room, but he was steady. He worked construction, had his own truck, paid his bills, and carried himself with this grounded confidence that drew me in. I used to tell my friends he was solid, the kind of man you could lean on when the world felt unstable. And in those first years, we were magic together. Late-night movies, weekend road trips, staying up texting each other like teenagers. He made me laugh and I made him blush. We weren't perfect, but we were us, playful, full of possibility. Then somewhere around our 7th year, something changed. It wasn't a single moment. It was slow, creeping. I stopped laughing at his jokes, not because they weren't funny, but because I was already distracted, already elsewhere in my head. He'd kiss me on the neck when I was scrolling through my phone, and instead of leaning into it, I'd flinch. He thought it was stress from my job at the school, and maybe it was at first. I was working late nights, managing endless meetings, coming home drained. He picked up the slack at home, cooking, folding laundry, even running my bath. Most women would have killed for that kind of husband. But instead of pulling me closer, it made me feel smothered, like his kindness was a mirror reflecting what I couldn't give back. And the bedroom? That dried up, too. Months passed without intimacy. He would bring it up gently, telling me he missed us, and I'd give some excuse about being tired or not in the mood. The truth was uglier. I just didn't feel that desire for him anymore, and I hated myself for it. He kept trying though, planning trips, surprising me with little gestures, even renting a cabin one weekend just to reconnect. I remember sitting by the fire, scrolling through my phone while he tried to pull me closer. And the words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. Can you not? I just want to be left alone. The look on his face that night should have been enough to snap me back, but it didn't. If anything, it made me withdraw further. Every time he reached out, it felt like pressure. Every kiss, every compliment, every hopeful glance only reminded me of how far apart we'd drifted, like standing in the same room, but on opposite sides of a canyon. I thought if I kept my distance, maybe he'd stop noticing. Maybe he'd stop trying. But Daniel wasn't the type to quit. He held on, held us together, even when I was already halfway gone. The breaking point came on a random Thursday. He sat down beside me while I was watching my crime shows and said, "Do you think we could talk after this episode?" I muted the TV, already annoyed, and snapped, "What is it now?" He looked at me with those tired eyes and whispered, "I miss being close to you. I miss us." And without hesitation, I said it. I have no desire for intimacy. Not with you. I just don't feel that way anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared at me like he was seeing the truth for the first time. Then, without a word, he packed a bag and walked out the door. I didn't ask where he was going. I didn't even get up from the couch. I just unmuted the TV as if nothing had happened. But inside, something cracked. Not a sharp snap, more like a quiet tearing I couldn't undo. Because deep down, I knew I'd just ended my marriage in the coldest way possible. The sound of the front door closing behind Daniel that night has never left me. It wasn't slammed. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, final. And that kind of silence cuts deeper than any shouting match ever could. I sat there on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering across the room, pretending to watch. But my mind wasn't on the screen. My chest felt heavy, my stomach twisting like I had swallowed something sharp. I had wanted him to stop pressuring me, to stop asking for closeness I couldn't give, but I never imagined he'd actually leave. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I don't even remember. But when headlights flashed outside, I pulled the curtain back just enough to see his truck backing out of the driveway. My heart skipped when I saw another car pull up at the same time. It was Rachel, my best friend since college. She hopped out in pajama pants and a hoodie, her hair tied up, a bottle of wine in her hand. She must have seen Daniel driving away, because instead of coming to the door, she walked straight toward his truck. I panicked. My throat went dry. Something told me she wasn't just checking on him. She knew. And sure enough, when I saw her lean against his window, talking to him like she'd been waiting for this moment, my chest clenched. I couldn't hear their words, but I could feel the weight of them. Her body language, the way she looked at him, the way he didn't drive off right away, it all told me that she was saying things I never had the courage to admit. Jealousy? No, it was something worse. Fear. Fear that my best friend might be the one to give him the comfort I refused. When she finally walked back to her car and Daniel drove off, I wanted to scream. Instead, I sank to the floor, my head in my hands. What had I done? I had pushed him so far that he found comfort in someone else's honesty. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, staring at the empty side of the bed. My mind raced with every word I had thrown at him over the past year. The rejection, the sighs, the eye rolls, the flinches. They replayed like a cruel highlight reel. In between, memories forced themselves in, him tracing lazy circles on my back when I couldn't sleep, singing off-key in the kitchen just to make me laugh. I had smothered the very things I used to love. By morning, my phone buzzed with texts I wasn't ready to face. One from Daniel's buddy asking if he was okay. Another from Rachel, just 3 words. Are you all right? I couldn't bring myself to reply. Later that day, I finally got a text from Daniel himself. 3 short messages. Where are you? Seriously, you're being dramatic.
Dramatic?
That's what I called him for years whenever he tried to talk about his feelings. And now he was throwing the word back at me. Except this time, he wasn't the one begging for attention. He was gone. I stared at the messages, my hands trembling. And for the first time, panic set in like a tide I couldn't hold back. Panic that maybe he wasn't coming back. Panic that maybe my safe, steady husband had finally stopped fighting for us. That evening, I drove past the house where I thought he might be staying, but his truck wasn't there. The driveway was empty. For the first time in our marriage, I had no idea where my husband was or who he was with. I told myself I still had time, that he'd cool down, that he'd eventually come home. But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew the truth. I had pushed him too far. And Rachel, she knew things. Things I had vented about Daniel in late-night conversations over wine. What if she told him? What if she had already said too much? The thought haunted me, because if Daniel had finally heard the words I'd only dared say behind his back, then my marriage wasn't just broken. It was over. The days after Daniel left blurred together. The house felt like a museum of us. Frozen mugs in the sink, his jacket on the hook, the dent in his pillow still holding his shape. I kept telling myself he'd come back, that he just needed space, that this was just another argument, one of those rough patches couples eventually push through. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap, only for it to sink again when it wasn't him. And then 3 days later, my fear became reality. Rachel showed up at my door. She didn't even knock softly. She pounded like she had every right to walk in. And maybe she did. After all, she knew me better than anyone else. She'd been my confidant for years, the person I vented to whenever I felt trapped in my own marriage. But when I opened the door and saw her face, I knew she had already spoken to Daniel. You told him, didn't you? I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of the question. Rachel crossed her arms, her jaw tight, and looked me up and down like she could see straight through me. He deserved to know the truth, Emily. You've been tearing him down for years, making him feel like he was asking for too much when all he wanted was to be loved back. Her words hit harder than I ever expected. They landed with the force of a punch, knocking the breath from my chest. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wanted to deny it, to defend myself, but there was nothing left to say. That wasn't your place, I snapped, the bitterness rising in my throat. My face burned with anger. You don't know what it's like living with him. Always needing, always pressing. My words stumbled out of me, filled with a bitterness I hadn't even known I was capable of. Needing what? I shot back at her, feeling the weight of the accusation heavy on my shoulders. Needing more affection? More respect? More from me than I could ever give? You don't understand. You didn't see how much I was drowning. I tried to steady my breath, but the fury was swelling inside me. I couldn't let Rachel see the cracks that had formed beneath my hardened exterior. Rachel didn't flinch. She cut me off sharply, her eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and something else, maybe disappointment, maybe pity. Needing what? A little affection, a little respect. God, Emily, do you even hear yourself? She stepped forward, closing the space between us, and it felt like she was calling out every mistake I had ever made in our friendship, every moment where I had failed Daniel. You had a man who showed up for you every single day, and instead of appreciating it, you mocked him behind his back. Do you know how cruel that sounds? Her words were sharp, each one cutting deeper than the last. I felt exposed, as though she had peeled back every protective layer I had built over the years. Do you know he used to sit in his truck outside your house at lunch just to hear your voice on the phone? Rachel's voice dropped, her tone softer now, but there was no comfort in it. He told me he waited for you to call first for once, and you never did. The words sliced through me, and I felt a cold chill settle in my chest. The image of Daniel, sitting alone in his truck, waiting for me to reach out, was too much to bear. I thought I was venting, letting out the frustrations of a marriage that was slowly slipping away. But now, those private thoughts were out in the open, twisted into accusations, and Rachel was using them against me. I froze. My mind was spinning with everything I had said over the years, every cruel joke, every sharp remark. The times I had rolled my eyes when Daniel wanted to cuddle, or how I'd told Rachel he was too soft, always wanting more from me than I was willing to give. Those weren't just words, they were weapons now. I realized that everything I had casually confessed to Rachel had taken on a life of its own, and now it was backfiring. My chest tightened with guilt, my throat dry. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Did you tell him everything? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I felt my heart begin to race in my chest, each beat loud in my ears. My stomach churned, a deep, nauseating feeling that made it hard to breathe. I already knew the answer, but I had to ask. Rachel hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor as she took a deep breath. I told him enough. Enough for him to see that it wasn't all in his head. That he wasn't crazy. That you stopped loving him a long time ago. Rachel's voice softened, but there was no kindness in it. She wasn't trying to console me. No. She was laying out the truth, piece by painful piece, and I had no choice but to take it. The sting of her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to defend myself, to argue that I hadn't meant it like that it wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I knew she was right. I had checked out long before Daniel had walked out the door. My knees felt weak. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. You've ruined everything, I whispered, my voice thick with grief. I felt hollow, like the room was closing in on me. I had pushed Daniel too far, let the distance between us grow so wide that no amount of apologies could ever bridge it. This wasn't your fight, Rachel. I didn't ask you to step in. You had no right to get involved. My voice cracked with a mix of anger and something darker. I wanted to scream at her, to push her away, but the truth of it all weighed too heavily on me. No, she said quietly, her voice steady, unflinching. You did that yourself. Her words were calm, but they hit me harder than any argument ever could. The silence that followed was suffocating. My chest burned with a mix of anger and shame. Anger at her for betraying me by telling Daniel the truth, but mostly shame because deep down I knew she was right. I had destroyed the most important thing in my life, and now there was nothing left to do but sit in the wreckage I had caused. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. Emily, is there someone else? The question hung in the air like a sharp knife, and I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a cold rush of fear wash over me. What was she implying? What did she know? My mouth went dry as I tried to find my voice. What? I asked, my voice shaking. I stared at Rachel, trying to make sense of what she had just asked. My mind raced with panic as her words echoed in my head. No. Of course not. I answered quickly, too quickly. But Rachel wasn't fooled. The look on her face told me she wasn't buying it. There was suspicion in her eyes, and maybe, just maybe, she had already figured it out. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the sweat begin to bead on my forehead. I tried to calm myself, but everything inside me screamed that she knew. She knew something I wasn't ready to admit. You sure about that? Rachel pressed, her voice low and knowing. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing as if she were seeing through me. Because something feels off, Emily. You've been distant for so long, and now there's this coldness about you. It's not just stress, is it? There's more to it. Her words wrapped around me like chains, and I could feel the pressure building in my chest. How could I lie to her? How could I keep denying something I had barely acknowledged myself? The truth was, there was someone else. Not in the way Rachel probably imagined, but still, I couldn't deny the connection. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Ethan. I hadn't meant for it to happen. I hadn't planned it. But the way he looked at me, the way he seemed to care about me in a way Daniel hadn't in months, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in so long. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself it was just harmless attention, just some friendly banter. But now, in the quiet of my living room with Rachel staring at me, the truth was too close to ignore. Ethan, I whispered, barely able to get the name out. Rachel's eyes softened just slightly, but there was no judgment in them, just understanding. It's not what you think, I began, but even I could hear the weakness in my voice. It's just, he's someone who listens. He notices when I'm not okay. He doesn't judge me. He just gets me. I paused, feeling the weight of my own words sink in. It was too late to take them back. And Daniel never did? Rachel asked softly, and there was the question that cut deeper than any accusation. You've been pushing Daniel away for so long, Emily, that you stopped noticing the things he was doing for you. You stopped seeing the man who would have done anything to make you happy, who loved you unconditionally. And now, you're turning to someone else for validation. Her words were a mirror, showing me the painful truth I had been running from. I had ignored Daniel's efforts, taking him for granted, and now I was searching for comfort elsewhere. It wasn't like that, I said quickly, but the words sounded hollow even to me. I had crossed a line. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore, it was about everything I had neglected in my marriage. I never meant to hurt him. I didn't mean to let it get this far. My voice cracked as I tried to explain. But there was no explanation that could make up for the years of neglect, the countless times I had shut Daniel out. How could I ever fix that? How could I ever make up for pushing him away? Rachel didn't say anything for a long while. She just stood there, her eyes watching me with a quiet sadness. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. Emily, you're not the person I thought you were. You've let this happen, and now you're sitting here pretending like you can fix it with a simple apology. Her words stung more than I expected. It was true, I had let this happen. I had let the distance grow between us until there was no room for us to come back together. And now, standing in front of Rachel, I realized that it wasn't just Daniel who was gone, it was me too. You're right, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I've made mistakes. I've pushed him away for so long that I don't even know how to fix it anymore. The weight of it all settled heavily on my shoulders, and I felt tears start to form in my eyes. I had ruined the best thing that had ever happened to me. I didn't appreciate him when I had him. I continued, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I took him for granted, and now he's gone. Rachel sighed and stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. It's not too late, Emily. You still have time to make things right, but only if you really want to. Her words were the lifeline I hadn't realized I needed. I had spent so long wallowing in regret, convinced that there was nothing I could do to change what had happened. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to fix it. You have to want it though, she said, her voice gentle but firm. You have to be willing to do the hard work to make it right. And that starts with being honest with yourself. I nodded slowly, the weight of Rachel's words sinking in. She was right. I couldn't keep running from the truth. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. I had to face the consequences of my actions, and I had to start doing the hard work of rebuilding what I had broken. It wouldn't be easy. It might even be too late. But if there was even a sliver of hope left, I had to try. I spent the next few hours sitting in the quiet of the house, the weight of Rachel's words lingering in the air. The house felt so empty now, even though it was full of reminders of what once was. I wandered from room to room, touching his things, his jacket on the hook, his shoes by the door, his favorite mug still sitting on the counter. Each item felt like a ghost, haunting me with memories of a man I had pushed away. I couldn't deny it any longer. Daniel was gone. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted him back. That thought hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so much time blaming him, resenting him for not being the person I wanted him to be, that I never took a moment to stop and think about who I had become. What kind of person pushes away someone who loves them so completely? What kind of person destroys a relationship because they're too busy chasing something they can't even define? I had lost myself in the chaos of my own insecurities, and now I was paying the price. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the messages that had come through while I was talking to Rachel. There were a few from Daniel's friends, asking if he was okay. Some from my family, checking in. And then there was one from Rachel, 3 words. Are you alright? I stared at it for a moment, feeling a mixture of gratitude and guilt. She was the only one who had stayed by me, even when I had treated her like a sounding board for all my frustrations. Now, she was the one telling me the truth, and I hated her for it, but I also knew she was right. I looked down at the text from Daniel. The first one from earlier, where are you? Seriously, you're being dramatic. The second, come on, this is ridiculous. And the third, let's just talk, okay? He wasn't begging, he wasn't pleading, he was asking for communication, asking for connection. And I had shut him out. I had made him feel like his love was an inconvenience, like his affection was something to be avoided. How had I let it get this far? How had I let him slip through my fingers? I sat down on the couch, holding the phone in my hands. My mind was racing, my emotions all over the place. I wanted to reach out to Daniel, to send him a message, to tell him everything I was feeling, but I didn't know where to begin. What could I possibly say? I'm sorry? Those words felt empty. I had said them before. They had never been enough. I had to do more than apologize. I had to prove that I was willing to fight for what I had almost destroyed. I picked up the phone again, staring at Daniel's number. I thought about calling him, but what would I say? I could hear his voice in my head, the frustration and hurt mixed in with the love he still felt for me. He wouldn't pick up, I knew that. He had moved on, and I had no one to blame but myself. I dropped the phone onto the coffee table, the weight of it pulling me deeper into the pit of regret. I had no idea where Daniel was now. He could be anywhere with anyone, and I had no right to know. That thought made me sick. The idea that I had lost him, that he could be out there, moving on without me, hurt more than I could have imagined. But I deserved it. I had made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. Every part of me screamed to reach out to him, to fix things, but I knew better than that. There was no fixing something this broken. What we had was gone. The years of emotional distance, the late-night arguments, the silent treatments, the rejection, it had all built up into something too big for either of us to repair. I thought about Rachel's words again. You still have time to make things right, but only if you really want to. She had been right about one thing. There was a chance, however slim, that I could repair what I had broken. But that chance wouldn't come from sending an apology. It wouldn't come from a text or a phone call. It would come from a deep, real change. It would come from looking at myself in the mirror and accepting the role I had played in all of this. It would come from finding the strength to take responsibility for my mistakes and to actually work toward earning back the trust one had lost. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't have the answers. I didn't have a plan. But I knew one thing. If I wanted to even have a chance of fixing this, I had to start with me. I couldn't blame Daniel anymore. I couldn't blame Rachel. I had to own the fact that I had pushed everyone away. I had to stop being the victim of my own choices and start being the person who could change. But was I capable of that kind of transformation? I spent the rest of the day in a fog, lost in my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, the hurt in his eyes, the quiet resignation in his posture. I remembered the last time we were together, how his words had echoed in my mind long after he had left. I miss us. Those words haunted me. They were the last thing he said before walking out the door. And now, they were the words that would guide me through the next part of my journey. Because if I was going to find my way back to him, if there was any way to repair the damage I had caused, it had to start with the love we once shared. The following morning, I woke up with a heaviness that had become all too familiar. The bed felt emptier than it had the night before, as though the space where Daniel used to be was still occupied by the absence he had left behind. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that my life was slipping through my fingers. The realization hit me like a cold wave. I had let the best thing in my life slip away, and I didn't know if I had the strength to get it back. I tried to distract myself. I went through the motions of making breakfast, scrolling through my phone, checking emails, but none of it mattered. Everything felt distant, like I was watching my life from the outside. I kept thinking about Daniel, about how his absence had turned everything into a dull blur. I tried to tell myself that it was for the best, that he needed space, that maybe this was a wake-up call for both of us. But the truth was, it wasn't about space anymore. It was about everything I had failed to give him when it mattered most. I found myself thinking about the small things. The way Daniel used to hum while he made coffee in the morning, the way his socks always ended up scattered across the living room floor, the way he'd always check in to see how my day had gone, even when he was exhausted. I had dismissed all of that, taken it for granted, assuming it would always be there. And now it wasn't. The thought of never hearing his voice again, never feeling his hand on my shoulder, was almost unbearable. The phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "You need to talk to him, Emily." I stared at the words for a long moment, unsure of what to do with them. Rachel had always been the voice of reason, but this time, I wasn't sure if there was anything left to say. What could I possibly say to Daniel that hadn't already been said? "I'm sorry?" I couldn't bear the thought of offering empty words when I knew deep down that the real work had to come from actions, not just apologies. But what could I do? I was paralyzed by my own shame. The guilt weighed me down so heavily that it felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I couldn't fix the past, couldn't undo the hurt I had caused. And yet, there was a part of me, small, fragile, that still held on to the hope that if I could just find the right words, just find a way to show Daniel how sorry I was, maybe I could still save us. I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel's number. My heart raced as I waited for the line to connect. The ringing felt endless, each sound echoing louder in my ear, until finally, it went to voicemail. "Hey, it's me," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know where you are right now or what you're thinking, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've messed up in ways that I don't even know how to fix, but I want to try. Please, just let's talk. I miss us." I ended the message before I could say anything more, not trusting myself to speak further. My hands were trembling as I hung up the phone. I sat there for a while, staring at the screen, waiting for a response that never came. Time seemed to slow, the minutes stretching into an eternity. My stomach twisted in knots. I knew I couldn't force Daniel to come back, to forgive me, to make everything right. But I had to try. Even if it was just one last attempt to show him that I still cared, that I wasn't as cold as I had become. The hours passed, and the silence between us grew. I thought about how we used to talk for hours, how we used to laugh until our stomachs hurt. I missed those moments more than I could ever put into words. But I also knew that time had passed, and time didn't heal everything. Sometimes it only deepened the wounds. And I wasn't sure if we could ever find our way back to what we once had. As the day wore on, I found myself lost in the memories again. I thought about the first time I met Daniel, how easy it was to talk to him, how comfortable I felt just being in his presence. It had felt like I had found someone who understood me, someone who could give me the love I had been searching for. But somewhere along the way, I stopped appreciating it. I took him for granted, and now I was paying the price. That night, as I sat alone in the house, the reality of it all hit me like a wave. Daniel was gone, and no matter how hard I tried to fix it, no matter how many apologies I gave, it might never be enough. I could only hope that one day he would find it in his heart to forgive me. But for now, all I could do was live with the silence and the regret that had become my constant companions. Please like, comment, and do not forget to subscribe for more.